starts here and where love begins. The fluorescent lights of Sterling and Associates had long since dimmed when Maya Chen finally looked up from her laptop, her eyes burning from 7 consecutive hours of reviewing contracts. The 42nd floor was silent except for the distant hum of the cleaning crew's vacuum, and she was alone, or so she thought, until she noticed the glow from the corner office, the one that belonged to Alexandra Sterling herself. Maya's heart did that strange flutter it always did when she thought about her boss, a reaction she'd been trying to suppress for the past 8 months with varying degrees of success. She gathered her things, telling herself she'd just peek in to say goodnight, nothing more. But what she saw through the half-open door stopped her cold. Alexandra wasn't reviewing documents or preparing for tomorrow's board meeting. She was crying, her perfectly composed facade completely shattered, her head in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and wounded inside her. Maya stood frozen in the doorway, her professional instincts warring with something far more primal and protective. Alexandra Sterling was a legend in the corporate world, the youngest senior partner in the firm's 60-year history, a woman who commanded boardrooms with a single glance and negotiated million-dollar deals before lunch. She was untouchable, unreachable, perfect in her tailored suits and her calculated smiles. But here, in this moment, she was simply human, simply broken, and Maya couldn't walk away. She knocked softly, and when Alexandra's head snapped up, her gray eyes red-rimmed and vulnerable, Maya saw something she'd never expected to see. Recognition, not of an employee interrupting her private moment, but of someone she was almost relieved to see. Without asking permission, Maya walked in, closed the door behind her, and sat down across from the woman who'd occupied her thoughts during countless sleepless nights. Alexandra tried to compose herself, wiping at her eyes with trembling fingers, but the dam had already broken. The words spilled out in fragments. A 15-year marriage ending, her husband's affair with someone younger, the realization that she'd built an empire while her personal life crumbled into dust. Maya listened without judgment, without the pity that Alexandra would have hated, just steady presence, and the kind of understanding that comes from having survived your own betrayals. When Alexandra finally stopped talking, the silence between them wasn't awkward but charged with something electric and terrifying. Maya reached across the desk, her hand hovering just inches from Alexandra's, and said the truest thing she'd ever spoken. She told Alexandra that perfection was exhausting, that maybe the real strength was in allowing yourself to fall apart and trusting someone enough to witness it. Their fingers touched just barely, but it felt like the world tilted on its axis. That night marked the beginning of something neither of them had planned for, something that grew in the spaces between professional meetings and accidental touches in the elevator. Maya started staying later, not because she had work to finish, but because those evening hours with Alexandra became the part of her day she lived for. They talked about everything except what was happening between them, dancing around the obvious attraction with the kind of denial that made every interaction feel like playing with fire. Alexandra began to change, softening in ways that surprised everyone in the office. She remembered birthdays, asked about people's families, smiled more freely. But with Maya, she was different in a way that made her both terrified and exhilarated. She caught herself looking for Maya in meetings, her day feeling incomplete until she heard Maya's voice, saw her smile, felt that inexplicable peace that came from simply being in the same room. The tension between them built for months until it became almost unbearable. Maya dated other women, trying to convince herself that what she felt for Alexandra was just admiration, just respect, just anything except love. But when one of those dates went well, when a kind and age-appropriate woman kissed her goodnight, all Maya could think about was how wrong it felt, how her body refused to respond because her heart was already claimed by someone else. Alexandra, meanwhile, finalized her divorce and threw herself into work with even more intensity, as if she could outrun what she was feeling. She promoted Maya, giving her bigger cases, more responsibility, telling herself it was because Maya deserved it, which was true, but also secretly enjoying the excuse to work more closely with her. They were lying to themselves and everyone around them, and it was only a matter of time before the truth demanded to be acknowledged. The breaking point came during a business trip to Seattle. They'd been sent to close a deal with a major client, and the meetings ran so late that they ended up at the hotel bar, exhausted and punchy from stress. Alexandra ordered whiskey, Maya ordered wine, and somewhere between the second and third drink, the carefully maintained walls between them began to crumble. Alexandra confessed that she'd known she was attracted to women since college, but had buried it under the weight of family expectations and societal pressure. She'd married Michael because it was what was expected, built her career to prove she was worthy of respect, and lost herself entirely in the process. Maya listened with tears in her eyes because she understood that particular kind of loss, that sacrifice of self for the comfort of others. When Alexandra asked Maya why she'd never mentioned having a girlfriend, never talked about her personal life, Maya's laugh was bitter and honest. She said she'd learned early that loving women in corporate America meant keeping that love invisible, that she'd dated quietly and never brought anyone to company events, that she'd made herself small to stay safe. Something shifted in that conversation. Some final barrier dissolved. Alexandra looked at Maya with an intensity that made breathing difficult and said she was tired of being safe, tired of pretending, tired of denying what she wanted. Maya's response was barely a whisper, asking what Alexandra wanted even though she knew. Even though the air between them was so charged it could have sparked a fire, Alexandra's answer was to stand up, extend her hand, and ask Maya to come upstairs with her. Not as colleagues, not as boss and employee, but as two women who were done lying to themselves. Maya took her hand, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs, and they rode the elevator in silence, fingers intertwined, both knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. Their first kiss was in the hallway outside Alexandra's room, sudden and desperate, months of longing compressed into a single moment that felt like coming. Home and jumping off a cliff? Simultaneously. They stumbled into the room, hands trembling as they discovered each other, whispering confessions between kisses. Alexandra told Maya she'd been falling for months, that every smile, every thoughtful comment, every moment of quiet competence had chipped away at her defenses until she was completely undone. Maya confessed that she'd loved Alexandra almost from the beginning, that she'd tried so hard to stop, to be professional, to protect herself, but love didn't follow rules or respect boundaries. They made love with a tenderness that contradicted the urgency of their need, taking time to learn each other's bodies, to whisper promises they hoped they could keep, to create a memory that would sustain them through whatever came next. But morning brought reality crashing back with brutal efficiency. They had to return to the office, to the structures and hierarchies that made their relationship not just complicated but potentially career-destroying. Alexandra was still technically Maya's boss, and office romances were frowned upon, let alone a relationship between a senior partner and a junior associate that crossed both professional and queer lines. They tried to hide it, tried to be discreet, but love has a way of making itself visible. Their colleagues noticed the softness in Alexandra's eyes when she looked at Maya, the way Maya's whole demeanor changed when Alexandra entered a room. The rumors started quietly, whispers in the break room, knowing looks in the hallways, and then, inevitably, someone complained to HR about favoritism and inappropriate relationships. The meeting with HR and the managing partners was brutal. Alexandra sat stone-faced while they questioned her judgment, suggested she was using her power inappropriately, implied that Maya was sleeping her way to advancement. Maya wanted to defend them both, to shout that what they had was real and precious and worth fighting for. But Alexandra's hand on her knee was a silent request for patience. When they were finally alone, Alexandra told Maya she wouldn't let this destroy her career, that Maya had worked too hard to have her accomplishments diminished by bigotry disguised as policy. She said she would step back, take a different position, make whatever changes necessary to protect Maya's reputation. But Maya refused, saying she wasn't interested in a career built on hiding who she loved, that she would rather leave Sterling and associates than pretend Alexandra didn't mean everything to her. They made the decision together, sitting in Alexandra's apartment with their hands clasped, knowing it would cost them both, professionally but understanding that some things were worth more than success. Alexandra resigned from her partnership, giving up the position she'd spent 15 years building, and Maya resigned with her. They used their combined savings and Alexandra's severance package to start their own firm, a boutique practice focused on LGBTQ plus rights and employment discrimination. It was terrifying and exhilarating, walking away from security to build something together. But for the first time in both their lives, they were choosing love without apology or compromise. The first year was brutal. They worked 18-hour days from a tiny office that barely fit 2 desks, taking cases they believed in even when the clients couldn't pay much. Surviving on coffee and determination, there were moments when Maya wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake. If love was really worth financial instability and professional uncertainty, but every time doubt crept in, she'd look up to find Alexandra watching her with such complete adoration that all the fear evaporated. They were building something real, something that belonged entirely to them, and that was worth every sacrifice. Slowly, their reputation grew. Clients started seeking them out specifically, impressed by their expertise and moved by their personal investment in justice. They hired their first associate, then their second, then moved into a real office with windows and a conference room. If this story has touched your heart in any way, if it's reminded you that love is worth the risk and that being true to yourself matters more than any job or title, I'd be so grateful if you'd show your support. A like tells me these stories matter to you, and subscribing means you'll be here for more journeys of courage and love. Your engagement truly makes a difference. 3 years after leaving Sterling and Associates, Maya and Alexandra stood together at a lectern, accepting an award for their work in employment discrimination law. Alexandra's speech was eloquent and professional, thanking their team and their clients, but when she looked at Maya, her voice caught with emotion. She said that the greatest accomplishment of her life wasn't the award or the successful firm, but learning that love didn't make you weaker, it made you braver. Maya added that taking the risk on love, on each other, on building something true, was the best decision either of them had ever made. That night, in the quiet of their shared home, Alexandra got down on one knee with a ring that had belonged to her grandmother, asking Maya to make their partnership official in every possible way. Maya said yes through tears, pulling Alexandra into a kiss that tasted like joy and hard-won happiness. Their wedding was small and perfect, surrounded by the people who'd stood by them through the hardest times. As they exchanged vows promising to choose each other every day, to build a life of authenticity and courage, Maya thought about that night in the office when she'd found Alexandra crying. How neither of them could have imagined where that moment of vulnerability would lead. Love, she realized, often begins in the breaking. In the moments when we finally stop, pretending to be invincible and allow ourselves to be seen completely. Alexandra whispered against her lips, during their first dance, that she was grateful for every heartbreak that had led her to this moment, to this woman, to this life they'd built together. Before we end this journey together, I have a special request. If Maya and Alexandra's story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own courage or gave you hope for your future, please take a moment to leave a comment below. Share what this story meant to you, or simply tell me, do you believe that real love is worth any risk? Your words and your presence in this community mean the world to me. Years later, when young associates asked them how they'd built such a successful firm, Alexandra and Maya would share a knowing look before answering. They'd say it started with honesty, with refusing to hide, with understanding that professional success meant nothing without personal authenticity. But the real truth, the one they'd whisper to each other in quiet moments, was simpler and more profound. It started with love, messy, inconvenient, career-disrupting. Love that demanded they choose themselves and each other over everything else. And in making that choice, they'd found not just happiness but purpose, not just partnership but home. Where love begins isn't always comfortable or convenient, but it's always, always worth it. Their story proved that sometimes the greatest professional success comes from having the courage to fail by conventional standards, to build something new from the ground up, to trust that love is foundation enough for any dream. Maya and Alexandra had found each other in the fluorescent glow of a corporate office, but they'd built there forever, in the brave space between who they were expected to be and who they truly were. And that made all the difference.